or the freed slaves to have 40 acres and a mule to never be activated. And then a century plus of horror. First of all, the Jim Crowism, the lynching, 4,000 plus, predominantly men and women of color, men and women leaving their homes in the 1800s and the early 1900s, never to return. I think it is important as we discuss this that it penetrates to those who are listening, that this is not a cry for a handout. It is a cry for an acknowledgement that there has never been a response to the unpaid labor that helped build this nation. There is no doubt that this nation was built on the unpaid labor of slaves, never compensated. The banks on Wall Street were built on that. The transatlantic slave trade, creating wealth, was built on that. And so we come not with anger, even anguish, we come with facts. And this commission will be stood up to be standing on facts. It will take a deep dive into the facts of our history and where we are today. And I am grateful that we have colleagues like Jerry Nadler and, of course, Congressman Cohen, Chairman Cohen, that has helped us bring not only this story to the forefront by way of this commission, but it will also bring to us the idea of a solution. I want to close with some revelations where people have finally recognized concepts that they didn't recognize before. President Barack Obama indicated that the wealth issue warranted reparations, the wealth gap, which is 1/16 of the wealth of African Americans. The Caucasian community has 16 times that wealth. Harvard Medical School study that indicated if reparations had been given before the COVID-19, we would not have been sicker, more infected, and died as much. There is evidence. Finally, as we look at our children who are experiencing academic loss, we take a landscape ride around America, we'll find the worst schools, inadequate education, and children who are suffering in African-American communities. We don't look for a non-fact-based solution. HR 40 will give us that, and it will allow not only African-Americans, the descendants of enslaved Africans, but it will promote the economic engine of this nation. We come with a gift, and that gift is if reparations works, the nation will be better for it. And the world will see all of us as a nation that has no inability to address inhumanity. We do it forthrightly, openly, for the world to see. America will be received in the world on international reparations as a country that has come unto her own. Thank you so very much for being present on this call today. I yield back.
Thank you so very much, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And in your own words, we come with facts. We're going to now hear from Chairman Steve Cohen of Tennessee, who will address us for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. And it's good to be with you. And it's good to follow one of my leaders, my mentors since I've been in Congress, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who is the sponsor of this resolution and has been a great leader on so many issues. But she was the sponsor on this and came to me in the House and asked me to schedule it for a hearing. And I was happy to do it. I want to pay my respects again, as I've done many times and cannot do enough, to the late John Conyers, a great member of the House, who was the initiator of this proposal in 1989, and also was the reason why Res 194, which apologized for slavery and Jim Crow in the 110th Congress, which I sponsored, got a hearing and got on the floor and was able to pass, because John Conyers took it upon himself to do it when really most of the rest of the leadership shunned it and didn't want to have anything to do with it because they were concerned about the possible repercussions from others. So John Conyers, a star. I can't thank him enough. The hearing will be important on Wednesday. I so look forward to it. There's no question there was a promise made to the freed slaves of 40 acres and a mule. John Conyers had a hearing, which I attended, on this subject, HR 40. where Charles Ogletree, the distinguished attorney, said what we get out of this proposal, what we might get out of a panel consideration, a commission, might be something different than 40 acres and a mule. 40 acres and a mule, the 20th century equivalent was a condo and an SUV. And that's what he said. And he said, we don't know what it'll be. Could be great reparations in terms of massive influx of help with education, with job creation, with home ownership, and the opportunity to get homes, buy homes, live the American dream. But we've got so many deserts in the African-American community. We have them here in Memphis. We have them all through the country with their health deserts and food deserts, and these need to be rectified. We have not fulfilled our promise that we made to people who were brought here as slaves and remained as slaves when the nation was founded. And then it took a civil war to free them. Then it took much more after that to give them any opportunities, because we had Jim Crow for 80 or 90 years. And after Brown versus Board of Education, it took a while longer. So there have been lingering of slavery and Jim Crow, which we need to rectify. That was the language in the Res 194. We wish there would have been a Senate companion passed commensurate with the House bill, and that would have allowed for us to take action in a major way, but that didn't happen. So because of the actions of Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee and others, we are at this point to move forward, hopefully have a vote in the full House after the judiciary vote, and hopefully the House will pass the study of reparations. And after that, we just gotta, I don't know how you want to do it. If you're really religious, you gotta pray. You gotta pray every minute, every day, and without stop, that the Senate will take this up, because the Senate's a powerful obstacle to much progress. But the House makes progress. It shows the way, and eventually, all those ripples of hope, which Robert Kennedy wrote about in his speech in Johannesburg, they will come together, the ripples of hope that people send out in all different ways, and they can tear down the mightiest wall of oppression and even the most insolent and ill-considered and 20th century or 19th century minds, such as Mitch McConnell's. So I look forward to Wednesday. Thank all of you for participating, and let's hope that it goes well, and we will move on to the floor. I'm sure what we'll see. I cannot not imagine the Republicans bringing up Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They seem to be hung up on that, and who knows what else they'll bring up. But we will hold our heads high. We'll work in a positive fashion to pass this particular bill, H.R. 40, move it to the floor, and have historic action. Thank you very much, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you so very much, Chairman Cohen. And yes, we are all definitely looking forward to Wednesday for the markup. We will now hear from Congressman Jamaal Bowman, New York.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. Chairman Cohen, listen, we ain't worried about Mitch McConnell, and we ain't worried about the Senate. We gonna do what we need to do in the House, because this is an idea whose time has come. And I am so proud to be on this call with you all. I'm so proud to be a freshman member of Congress, standing on the shoulders of giants like Mr. Connors, like Representative Connors. So I'm just excited to be here. And let me just say this about Sheila Jackson Lee. Thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you so much for bringing me into the fold and allowing me to be in the fold. And I want to say on this call, no one works harder in Congress than Sheila Jackson Lee. I want to tell you that right now. The one word my office uses to describe her is relentless. She is relentless on this issue, and she is relentless on every issue. Thank you so much, Representative Jackson Lee, for your leadership. The discussion of reparations needs to begin with assessing and quantifying the harm inflicted by chattel slavery, but it can't end there. The discussion must be conducted with an understanding that trauma of racism against Black Americans is intergenerational, as are the material effects. And understanding that the compounding nature of racism has created a dynamic where Black people today must not only grapple with living in a country built on our sustained oppression, but also observe the many modern manifestations in our daily lives, our neighborhoods, our schools, our life experiences, even the monetary value of our homes. Today, the median wealth of Black households is $24,100, while the median wealth of white households is $189,100. The Black-white pay gap is as wide now as it was in 1950. 86% of children in majority Black school districts go to schools that are underfunded. Life expectancy is 6 years shorter for Black Americans than white Americans, a discrepancy that existed even before the COVID pandemic. And as you know, if you're Black, you're more likely to catch COVID, be hospitalized from COVID, and die from COVID because of the comorbidities that existed prior to COVID. The facts speak for themselves, but they don't tell the entire story. That story can only be told by forming a commission based on truth and reconciliation to gather information on how we can remedy these centuries of oppression. These inequalities exist in part because of our history of codified racism. That is de jure racism, racism that was written into our Constitution and our laws for centuries. But these discrepancies also exist through the de facto racism. That's racism that, while not standardized by law, was standardized by a society that had ingrained racism, biases, and a racial caste system in its DNA. When the New Deal was enacted by Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Federal Housing Authority was born, and from the FHA came redlining and the explicit policy to deny home loans to people living in Black neighborhoods. We can also discuss the Homestead Act of 1862, which granted over 270 million acres of land to over 1.5 million white families between 1868 and 1934. Land which turned into a base of capital to build into wealth. Those are just two examples, both powerful in their impact, of de jure racism. Through the years, we've transitioned to a system of de facto racism. That is racism that's not in our laws, yet permeates every facet of our society and our collective psyche. We see this today in Black work, including care work, being devalued relative to work predominantly performed by white Americans. We see it in our children being criminalized and punished in our schools at higher rates than white children. We see it in home appraisals, literally amounting to less than when appraisers are aware that the home has Black sellers. These impacts are just, if not more important to study and understand. We cannot fulfill our potential as a multiracial democracy if we do not heal these harms. Other nations have carried out historical oppression, have formed commissions for truth and reconciliation. Germany in the aftermath of the Holocaust, South Africa after apartheid, and Canada for its treatment of indigenous populations. We owe it to our entire country, not just Black America, to make this happen and put our nation on a path to healing together. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so very much, Congressman. And I want to remind folks, if you have questions, put it in the Q&A box, or you can put it in the chat, or let us know you have a question by raising your hand. We will get to Q&A right at the conclusion of hearing very briefly from our advocates. We're going to start with Dr. Ron Daniels, president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century and convener of NARC, National African American Reparations Commission. Advocates will speak for about a minute.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Moderator, and to our protocol having been established with our congressional leaders, Bowman, and of course, Chairman Cohen for his leadership. I also would like to say the National African American Reparations Commission works very closely with the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and I note that Professor Hilary Beckles, who is the chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, is present with us today. With the certification of the Evanston, Illinois Reparatory Justice Initiative as a model for municipal reparations and the pending markup of HR 40, we are on the brink of one of the most remarkable moments in American history. I can't emphasize that enough. I'm a history professor, among other things. This is one of the most remarkable moments in the history of these United States of America. And as our fearless leader, our courageous leader, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, visionary, courageous, has said many times, and I use her words, we can't wait, because reparations is the only policy prescription which addresses and redresses systemic racism in these United States of America. Cannot underline that enough. It is not possible really to envision a more perfect union that is talked about in glowing terms without addressing the issue of reparation. It is the predicate for that possibility. I have to also say that it is a moment in which we take great pride in acknowledging Congressman John Conyers and Queen Mother Audley Moore. And I say, Congresswoman, they're looking down and smiling on you and this entire team, because they know that this is an incredible moment and you have been at the forefront and in the lead. So they're smiling on this occasion, and we know that we're going to move forward with vigor, with vision, and with determination to make sure that, in fact, there will be a more perfect union because we have done the work that we have been called to do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniels. I'm going to now bring Dreesen Heath to the stage, racial justice researcher and advocate at Human Rights Watch. Take it away, Dreesen.
Thank you so much, Nkechi. We're so grateful to Congresswoman Jackson Lee for her courageous and steadfast leadership on HR 40, as well as Chairman Nadler and Chair Cohen, who have historically been strong supporters of this vital piece of legislation. And really for over 400 years, the well-being of the Black community has been an afterthought, and the government and non-government actors have compromised on the backs of Black people, creating systemic conditions of pervasive inequality and overwhelming disparity in almost all economic and social corners of the country, including areas of wealth accumulation, housing, education, access to healthcare, voter suppression, access to rights such as water, sanitation, nutritious foods, and a healthy and safe environment. Police killings and everyday racist enforcement and criminalization reminds us that we are not so far from the era of enslavement, and there needs to be transformative structural reforms. And so the US government has a responsibility to provide remedy and reparation for serious human rights violations and acts of racial discrimination, and should do so promptly. It is a large task, but I believe it's worth tackling. And so does this Congress if they advance HR 40 forward on Wednesday. I believe our government is up for the task for securing a racially just future for our country.
Thank you very much, Dreesen. And we're going to move right to Cam Howard, National Co-Chairperson of INCOBA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. You're on mute, Cam. There you are.
Thank you, Nkechi. And I also want to thank Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee for your relentless leadership on HR 40, as well as the 170 plus other congressional co-sponsors to date. I want to quickly state what HR 40 is designed to do and how. HR 40 is designed to create a commission with three primary goals. One is to illuminate the vast array of wrongful acts committed by this government against people of African descent for over 400 years. Two, to illuminate the myriad and entrenched negative consequences of those harmful acts. And three, develop proposals that would redress the harms and eliminate all the current lived consequences of those wrongful and harmful acts. Those remedy proposals would fall under 5 classes of remedies known as full reparations, which would include 1, cessation and guarantees of non-repetition, proposals and policies that would stop the ongoing harms and put in place structures to prevent their reoccurrence. 2, restitution, proposals designed to return us to a likely state had not the wrongful acts been committed. 3, compensation for damages not cured by restitution. 4, satisfaction, proposals aimed at returning our dignity eroded by the harmful acts. Apologies, monuments, and truth-telling are examples, and rehabilitation for the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical consequences of the historical harms. HR 40 allows for this government to begin the historic and necessary process to move this population from inherited and ongoing injury to wellness and receipt of justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cam. And our last formal speaker will be Rashad Robinson, who is the president of Color of Change.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure and honor to be with so many of my heroes on this call. I want to give a special thanks to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee for her leadership. When she calls, you answer, and she doesn't just call about legislation she's sponsoring. She calls when there's a policing issue in her community. She calls when there's an idea that she wants to strategize about. She is a true servant leader, and I want to just thank you, Sheila Jackson Lee, for being willing to continue to lead in the way that you've been leading. Congressman Cohen and Congressman Bowman, thank you both for your leadership on this work and your ongoing partnership. And I have to just say a special thanks to Dr. Daniels for his years of leadership around this work and all the ways in which he's encouraged next generation activists like myself over the years. And that's really where I want to root this in. Color of Change was founded in the aftermath of a flood, which was Hurricane Katrina. It was caused by bad decision makers and turned into a life-altering disaster by bad decision makers. Black folks were literally on their roofs begging for the government to do something and left to die. And the thing about Katrina, and the thing about so many moments that have illustrated sort of the ill-equipped nature of America to deal with the structural challenges, is that at the heart of Katrina, no one was nervous about disappointing Black people. Government, corporations, media, institutions that had created a system and a structures did not actually feel like they had to do anything about it. And this is why this bill is so important, because far too often we tell stories about inequality that are unfortunate rather than unjust. We tell stories like inequality is just like a car accident, not that is a nature of things that we have manufactured in this country and choices that have been made. And when we tell stories about inequality that are unfortunate rather than unjust, we end up with charitable solutions to structural problems. People thinking that it's enough to send water bottles to Flint instead of cleaning up those pipes, doing service days in inner city schools instead of actually ending how we deal with public education in this country and starting and moving anew. When we actually deal with that, we can move ourselves further. And that means that we have to tell the stories that are real. Black people are not less likely to get a loan from the bank. Banks are less likely to give loans to Black people. We don't need financial literacy programs. We need structural changes at the banks. And part of us studying and understanding it is so that we can move forward with real policies. I want to end by saying that this is about building power. It is about translating the visibility and the presence of this moment into the power to actually change the rules. This summer, racial justice for the first time ever became a majoritarian issue. The upticks in voter registration, the multiracial folks that took to the streets to make demands for a new tomorrow. When many people thought the best we could do in terms of activism was clap outside of our windows or uplift investigative journalism, it was racial justice that got people into the streets and powered people to action. So we know what racial justice can do for an election. The question will be for our elected officials is, what will the election do for racial justice? Will we be able to move forward in a direction that actually undoes the harms and ensures that justice can truly be real? Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so very much, Rashad, and you are absolutely correct. This is about building power. We're going to go to Q&A from the press. Well, I mean, we have over 70 press have tuned into this call. So this is an issue, again, whose time has come. I'm going to take the first two questions from representatives of the New York Times. The first one will be Juliet Fairley, and I'm going to read her question. And we have a hand raised from Nicholas Fondo, so he will proceed right after Juliet. But Juliet Fairley's questions, she has a number of questions, so you all let me know who wants to go on and respond. She's asking, what are the obstacles to passing the initiatives? If passed, how will it be determined that an individual is a descendant of slaves from the American South? And how much money can they expect to receive as a result? Who can give us a succinct answer to these probing questions from New York Times? Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, take yourself out for mute and take it away.
The succinct answer is that there is the underlying basis of HR 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals. And that will be the directive of the Commission it would be presumptuous of us to be able to define this as a check. You've heard most of those who have spoken to say that this is systemic and it will not be responded to only by a check. We expect to look at the landscape of disparities by way of this commission, dealing with the inadequacies in education, healthcare, sociologically, psychologically, politically, economically. The wealth gap varies. It is a common statement is that the wealth gap is as large in today as it is and was in 1967. This is what John Conyers saw in 1989. That was his vision, that we are in 1989 and we have made no progress. As it relates to passage, we look forward to passing it out of the House. We have the commitment of the entire House leadership and expect that the numbers of co-sponsors who come from all over the country, who are moderates, conservatives, and liberals, to be the engine to push this particular legislation forward. Having the chairman and subcommittee chairman, something we probably have not had as enthusiastically as we have it now today. But who can glaringly look at facts of redlining? Who can look at the facts of the large numbers of mass incarceration? The numbers are stunning. Who can look at the inadequacies in wealth, the academic loss that our children face, the continued discrimination in the workplace? These are all readily documented. The only thing we need to push this legislation forward is that Americans who are not the descendants of enslaved Africans to not look at this in anger and to not be full of anguish, but to realize that there has been a tradition where the government fixes problems. This is a problem that the government sanctioned both in the Constitution and statutory law since the beginning of slavery. And so we don't in any way believe that we will be without facts. And I love what was said by Rashad as it relates to Katrina. It was a very prime example. The other twin to Katrina is COVID-19. And with all of these facts, I don't think that anyone can be angry about a response to a government-sanctioned slavery and a continuation of segregation and racism promoted and perpetrated by the laws of this nation. We have confidence that we will be able to convince our colleagues, convince Americans, and that's why we say why we can't wait.
Thank you very much. We have a hand raised, Nicholas Fondos from New York Times. Can we bring him on so he can ask his question live?
Yeah, he should be able to speak.
Okay, you can speak now.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Thank you all for taking my question. I want to ask about the relationship between HR 40 and some other pieces of the Biden domestic policy agenda, which seem to be perhaps rhyming with some of the themes that you all are talking about today in terms of more self-consciously than we've seen perhaps at any point in the past, but certainly in the recent past, is COVID relief proposals, domestic policy agenda as it relates to infrastructure and the new jobs plan being put forward, takes some or proposes some direct investments in Black communities, schools, repairing damage done by interstate highways or other projects, kind of to support Black farmers, go across the board. I'm curious what you see as the relationship between that and this bill, and could those programs, if increased in size or discussed in a different way, you think be considered the kind of compensatory reparations that might be contemplated here, or not? And if not, why not?
Dreesen, would you like to answer that? Dreesen?
Yes, please. Thank you for that question, Nicholas. And I think it's an important one because lines are often blurred by governments of relief and aid and public policy programming that is necessary to meet people's everyday needs. And and investments that are necessary to meet everyday needs. And the process of reparation, which is tailored, a specialized process to rectify specific harms that were committed. And so we need bold transformational budget and also other investments that will historically or lead to historic investment in Black and Brown communities, which have historically been disinvested in by public programming. But in addition to that, we need the reparations measures to go alongside. They are not a replacement for each other. And you get into pretty tricky territory if you do try to replace, regular, what the government should be doing and increasing those investments in the Black community, in addition to what is needed to actually repair past harms to get to a place where we're eventually equitable. Without reparation, in addition to the investment, you continue to have the gaps widen over time, as we've seen generationally. So while they target poverty, while those infrastructure plans and other racial equity plans may target poverty, inequality, and violence being linked, this is not a replacement for what the HR 40 Commission will do in fully diagnosing the impacts of slavery and recommending direct remedies to rectify those.
Okay, thank you very much, Dreesen. I'm going to read the question from Beatrice Peterson from ABC News, and then we have a couple of hands raised. We have April Ryan's hand raised, so if we can peg her up to be able to raise her question. But Beatrice Peterson from ABC News is asking, has the White House engaged in any discussions with the lawmakers on crafting an executive action or order on reparations? Executive action or order of reparations. Who wants to take that question? Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
We are totally committed to and thank you for that question. John Conyers introduced this legislation in 1989 with a commitment and understanding of the necessity of a concreteness of legislation, a law being established that would address some of the many points that our panelists this afternoon have made. And so our strategy, of course, is one, to keep our colleagues informed, and certainly to engage and dialogue with the White House and keep them informed. I'm very grateful that through the campaign of last year, many of the presidential candidates offer their support for HR 40 and reparations, and our present leadership also indicated their understanding and support. But we are now on a legislative drive, and that is to mark this bill up, to set it for a floor vote, and to work the United States Senate. Any further strategies will be certainly addressed as needed, but we're committed to establishing this HR 40 as an enabling legislation to address the deep-seated racism and historic and systemic elements of mistreatment of African Americans through the centuries, and as well to address something that has happened to no other group in this country, no other group, and that is bondage, being held in bondage for over 200 years. We think it will be cleansing for this nation, and we think that it will be a step moving America forward. See us debate this question on the floor of the House.
Thank you very much. I would like to call on April Ryan right now from Griot, followed by Amaya King from Politico. So April Ryan, take it away.
Thank you so much for allowing me to ask a question on this call. It's a couple of questions in one, and I'm sorry I got on late, but if someone asks this question, please just indulge me and answer. I want to know the considerations in HR 40 and in this panel about General Sherman, 40 acres. What does that equate to today? Also, the considerations of Callie House, who had the ex-slave pension fund during slavery, after slavery, et cetera. And there were slaves that signed that, and these documents are in the National Archives. Mary Frances Berry says that if there is any group to be paid off first, would be the descendants from Callie House and those who signed for reparations. And my third question, as you invoke the president in this, for the last 24 years that I remember, not one president has apologized for slavery. And early on when that question began circulating during the Clinton years, there was a concern among many Black leaders who the president was then consulting with, that if you apologize for slavery, that means there needs to be a financial payment. Do you believe that an apology for slavery goes hand in hand with reparations, because it says that there was, from the federal government that allowed and participated in this, that there was indeed a wrong, and now there needs to be a correction for the wrong, repair for the wrong? Thank you.
Kim Howard, you want to address that?
Yeah, I want to address the first part of her question about HR 40, the 40 acres and a mule and what it means today. The 40 acres and a mule that General Sherman suggested and implemented was in response to the question to the Black clergy at the time was, what do you think you need to be free? And they stated emphatically that they needed land to be free, because all that you can produce from land. Today, what we need to be free is education, it's economic development, it's access to capital, it's food, it's healthy existence. It's a myriad of things today that we need in order to equate to what 40 acres would have did to our people at that time, and what we need to do today to be free. So the gambit of reparative initiatives that the HR 40 Commission is designed to do is really what will be equivalent to the 40 acres and a mule. We live in a different life, in a different time, and what it takes to actualize our human rights and human conditions is much different than at that particular time. So I'll just state that.
Okay, thank you, Cam. I'm not quite sure if Maya.
There were two other questions. I'm sorry. There were two other questions that had not been answered. I'm sorry.
My deepest apologies. Thank you very much.
So in regards to an apology, yes, an apology is definitely part of satisfaction. It's part of returning the dignity to people. And there's three basic parts to apology. One is the acknowledgement that a harm was done. The second is to take full responsibility that I committed this harm. I could have did other things, but I did this harm. I committed this harm, and I'm taking full responsibility of that harm. And three is a willingness to do whatever it takes to correct that harm. And we have not seen that in either apologies that we've gotten from this country. And an HR 40 Commission apology will be one that is built on those three components.
Thank you.
Let me quickly just make a quick response to that. I think what is important to take note is what you are offering. Thank you, April, for your questions. Are the very levels and layers of which have never been tapped, researched, or viewed as what should be the response. We want to stand up through this legislation a very strong commission that does not presume what the ultimate results will be, but it will fact find on not only the pension issue, which has been out there, but it'll also look at the enactment of legislation creating Social Security, which most African Americans were purposely rendered ineligible during the first 2 decades. It will dig into the consistent racism and or prohibitions of African Americans having their full citizenship. And out of that, we'll respond to the pension, we'll respond to the lack of 40 acres and a mule. They'll be calculating what that impact is over the range of individuals that will be ultimately eligible. I think the key element is standing up this commission and dealing with the direct connection between slavery and the condition of African Americans today and through the period post-slavery. We've never done that. And an apology by its very name will be an element of the commission, but the work of the commission will be the establishment of the reparation proposals, which will cross the gamut to be able to be responsive, honest, and effective.
Thank you so much.
Chairman Cohen, I think is going to respond to your questions as well, April Ryan, and then we will follow that with Amaya King. Congressman Cohen.
Thank you, April. It was good to have you in Memphis. It's good to have you here on Zoom. Next best thing. There has to be financial, economic response, not just an apology. And the apology we had in 2010, HRS 194 said that we are committed to rectifying the lingering consequences of Jim Crow and slavery. And that language passed the Senate too, but not in a resolution that was a companion. So both houses have seen that and said that they need to act on it, and that's essential. As far as when I brought this up in 2010, I asked the offices of Senators Clinton, Obama, and Kennedy to be my Senate sponsor. And admittedly, it was in 2008 we passed it. It was 110th Congress. Maybe I was a freshman congressperson, but I didn't get a response. And it was only after reaching out to Tom Harkin and seeing him and giving a last chance when I personally saw him that I got a Senate sponsor. So it wasn't an easy climb that we've made. We've come a long way, and we're going to come further.
Thank you very much. I wanted to go back and call on Amaya King from Politico. Her hand is still up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for doing this afternoon. Just wanted to ask sort of a follow-up question, I think, to what Representative Cohen was starting to talk about, which is moving this legislation now through the Senate. I know that it's very likely to pass in the House, but what has to happen to actually get it to move through the Senate? And do you have a plan to get your Republican colleagues on board? And also to add to that, in light of the recent developments that we've seen with corporations weighing in more on policy, is that something that you've also considered in terms of galvanizing more support for this?
Would like to tackle that question.
Does anyone want to do that? I'll go after.
I hate to be pessimistic, but I think the Senate is not a good place to be with this legislation or with any legislation that's progressive and advances in interest of African Americans in particular. You got to have 10 Republicans right now, and there are not that many of them that are going to quit and not run again and going to have a come to Jesus moment.
Well, our strategy is to get through the committee on Wednesday. Our strategy is to get through on the floor. Congressman Cohen is a realist in terms of the landscape of the United States Senate, but we're very delighted to have Senator Booker as a co-sponsor, and I think we're up to 16 co-sponsors in the Senate. And there have been bills that have started with probably less co-sponsors. And for those of us who know our history, the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act were not popular initiatives. And it took a lot of strategizing. We're going to wait to get through the markup and get through the House and then work with our Senate colleagues. And I think the point is well taken. We're in a different climate that has been driven a lot by the heinous act of murder of George Floyd and the pandemic of voter suppression. And so the question would be how far we can get in the Senate. We're going to work as hard as we can with all of the elements, including corporate America, which, by the way, a number of corporations and banks have already acknowledged the value and the validity of reparations. The chairman of the Federal Reserve out of Atlanta, a number of billionaires have recognized the value of reparations. I think that is a lot more than we've had. So with that in mind, we think we have a coalition individuals and organizations that we can take to the United States Senate and be very effective in at least strategizing to bring this to their attention as to why it should not move. It's difficult. It's difficult to pass the American Jobs Plan, but I think we have an opportunity to make our presence felt in the United States Senate. But we will take one house at a time, one part of the Congress at a time. Then we're going to work on the House and then the Senate.
Dreesen, I think you want to jump in on that.
Yes, just that was a great response. And in terms of just contextualizing this into history also is that every other federal reparations commission that's been administered has been a bipartisan commission. The Wartime Relocation Commission that studied the conditions of internment and relocation for Japanese Americans and others during World War II was a bipartisan commission. The Civil Liberties Act passed with bipartisan support. We have previous commissions, which we deem the Indian Claims Commission, as well as commissions established by President Carter to set up the national memorial around the Holocaust were also bipartisan efforts. So advocates on the ground will continue to push on both sides of the House. Yes, we need to get past the House, but in terms of precedent and support, there needs to be questions of this overarching historical history on bipartisanship and supporting other reparative measures for other communities.
Okay, so thank you. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to combine two questions together, Juliana Vicen's question and Nina Cavan's, and then we're going to look at Joanna Summers' question from NPR. So Juliana Vicen is asking for Jackson and Bowman, do you believe that this initiative could become a model for countries historically marked by slavery, such as Brazil? But I want to combine that with Nina Cavan's question about municipal reparations. Some people say the municipal reparation initiatives take away from HR 40. What are your thoughts? How influential are municipal initiatives, for example, Evanston, Illinois, in pushing HR 40 further? So folks are asking internationally and domestically. Who would like to begin to address those questions? Dr. Daniels, take it off of mute.
Thank you for the question. Very important questions. And frankly, the National African American Reparations Commission is delighted to have certified Evanston as a model for municipal reparations. And we did so fully aware that, quite frankly, federal reparations, as our leader, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, has pointed out time and time again, is what's required. Evanston is a model. It is modest. It's $10 million over 10 years. It helps to point the way. And in almost every instance, people who are doing local reparations have begun the process by endorsing HR 40. So there's no contradiction between local reparations and national reparations. In fact, you can make the case that they actually are building the case for why federal reparations are needed. And as Cam Howard has pointed out within COBRA, the building out of these local reparations initiatives actually begin to provide a kind of mechanism for implementation when HR 40 is passed. Finally, I would say that the whole world was watching Evanston, and the whole world is frankly also watching HR 40. Professor Hilary Beckles is reflecting on this. He has spoken time and time again about the impact and influence of the work that we're doing here on other nations. And when we and NARC convened an international summit in 2015 of 22 nations from all over the world, they were very much focused on HR 40 and what it would mean in order for them to move similar kinds of initiatives in Brazil, but not only in Brazil, in places like Costa Rica, Colombia, all over the world. We have the impact of this will be felt.
So thank you, Dr. Daniels. Juliana Summers, I'm going to read her question. I'm going to also invite Julia Fairley from New York Times, who we raised a question earlier. She has a number of other questions. If she would like to come on screen to ask questions, I want to give her that opportunity. But Juliana Summers' question from NPR, have you gotten any indication from the White House whether President Biden would sign this bill into law if it clears both chambers of Congress? I know he has been supportive of the idea of a reparation study, but I'm curious about his potential support of this specific legislation. Who would like to answer that question? Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
One of the things that has led us to come as far as we have is to continue to develop a widespread national and international support for HR 40. Dr. Daniels has articulated the international recognition, and obviously reparations is an international legal concept. But as well, the state of California has passed an exact HR 40 bill signed by the governor of that state. We have heard nothing to the contrary on the idea of a bill that will be passed by the House and Senate and that the White House would not receive in a positive sense. So at this time, we believe that the White House is aware of HR 40, has indicated their receptiveness to the commission that would study reparations. And for that reason, we're going to continue to work and get the bill to that point where it could be signed by the president. And at this time, we have no reason to think anything to the contrary.
Okay, thank you so very much. I want to bring Juliet Fairley back on to ask her question. And we just have about 3 more minutes left in this press briefing. So we'll be brief.
Because I know this.
Your sound is not good. Your sound is not good.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
Okay, sorry about that. Who would considered African American? Now that we have people here from the Caribbean, we have people here from Africa that have become citizens. So how is it going to be determined who is African American descendant of slaves if it's in fact passed?
I will go ahead and answer that. We're not going to presume the work of the commission. I think that has been our message throughout the passage of HR 40. The fact finding indicates that the descendants of enslaved Africans, now 4 million, built this country, and people of African who are African descendants of the enslaved Africans, are in fact the unfortunate recipients of disparate treatment, of racism, for a period of time lynched, unequal treatment throughout the landscape. And I listed the landscape, which is education, healthcare, the economy, sociologically, psychologically, scientifically. And so we expect the commission, which will have access to all of the agencies, will have access to any work that they need in terms of expert testimony, will be funded, will have a staff, will have the authority to subpoena. This will be a working commission. And in doing so, the academicians and others will define the ultimate working part of the commission as it is passed. We think that is the best approach because it would be untimely for us to write the commission's work beforehand. But I think what we want to emphasize is that persons who have felt the brunt of racism and who are the descendants of enslaved Africans in this country, however it be determined, are here. and are still experiencing the fright and the horror of racism attributable to the ongoing assessment and the ongoing interpretation and definition of people of this like. And it's evidenced again by conspicuous things, mass incarceration, inadequate primary and secondary schools, and unfortunately, encounters with law enforcement. Just three conspicuous things that will be part of the portion of the work that the commission is going to do.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. We've reached our time, and I'm going to just very briefly respond to the last question I see in the Q&A about the position of the Vice President of HR 40. Well, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is a proud sponsor of S40 in the Senate, so I think that that speaks for itself. I really want to just take the time to really thank our congresspersons, our leaders, our stalwart advocates with respect to this issue for being part of this press briefing organized primarily by Human Rights Watch and other organizations as well. Wednesday will be very historic. It's been 32 years since this bill was first introduced in the 101st Congress, and now I am looking forward to markup and passage out of House Judiciary Committee and then on to the floor of the House of Representatives. So again, I would like to thank everyone. I would like to thank the press that came out. If you have any further questions, all of the representatives here from Congress and the advocates are available. The contact information is in the press materials that you received, and we look forward to seeing everybody on screen at the markup on Wednesday morning, House Judiciary Committee. Again, this is Nikichi Taifa from the Taifa Group. On behalf of all of the groups, victory is ours.